shaping future UX leaders in an evolving industry. Before we dive into the insightful session we have planned, I'd like to share a brief story behind the creation of our cutting edge MDES UX program. Uh, if we look at a university curricula in India, we often notice a significant gap between industry expectations and academic training, sometimes up to 5 to 6 years. Universities don't have freedom to change their curriculum dynamically due to many reasons. There's always been a major challenge for students, leaving them unprepared for industry demands. At OP Jindal Global University, we recognized this gap and decided to take action. While many institutions might struggle to address this challenge, we are in a unique position. As you may know, OP Jindal is one of only four private universities in India to have the prestigious status of Institute of Eminence. This autonomy allows us to introduce innovative and industry aligned programs. So we wanted to bring the best of the best from the Bay Area to our curriculum so our graduate can compete on the global stage. Our MDes in UX user experience design program is the first of its kind, developed in partnership with Career Reactor, a division of UX Reactor. UX Reactor has been recognized by a 5000 for 4 years, 4 consecutive years, and has won the Fast Company Award for innovative innovation in design alongside companies like Google and Apple. With office in US, India, and Latin America, Career Reactor has become a leader in design education. And on the other side, today, OP Jindal Global University is ranked the #1 institution in India by QS World Rankings. So that's the story in a nutshell. Since its inception, this program has been a great success, and we're excited to reach out to talented candidates like you today to take this conversation further. We are honored to have we are honored to have with us one of the founding members of the Career Reactor, Professor Prasad Kantamneni. Without further ado, let me introduce him as our speaker for today. With over 25 years of experience, he has built, trained, and mentored high performing design teams across the globe. He co founded UX Reactor, an Inc. 5000 company, and has contributed to over 12 papers and patents. And notably, every internet user, if there's one feature every internet user has used, that is search assistance feature. I'm sure everyone must have used around the world. And this feature is designed by none other than Professor Prasad Kantamneni and patented and designed it. So he has worked with the world's best, such as Yahoo, Honeywell, VMware, Nokia, a few companies to mention. He is an alumni of Harvard Business School. Once again, welcome, Professor Prasad.
Thank you, Professor Venkatesh.
So, Professor Prasad, just before we get into the discussion, I'd like to quickly show the plan for today's discussion.
Sure.
Start with the insights into changing the landscape of careers with this AI age, and we'll have a interactive discussion with one of our students, and we'll open the session for question and answer from the audience. Over to you, Prasad.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you all. And this has been I'm always excited to share my insights and thoughts because AI fundamentally is changing a lot of the ways that we work, that we think, even how we should plan our careers. And I think this is the right time to start talking about it because it's reached a fever pitch, so to say, and it's already affecting a lot of our jobs and a lot of the way we go through our average day. So, Saurabh, if you could share your screen, that'd be great. But what I want to talk about, and again, the intention today is to very quickly run through, what we see is happening in the industry. So what I see in the industry from company perspective, and again, as a founder myself, I see this even for myself, but I see this happening on a larger scale as well. So what I see at a company's perspective is, you probably would have heard like 90% of companies want to use AI. The challenge there is less than, and again, 20% of the companies succeed, or 20% of those initiatives succeed. But the truth is, it's more like 15% or 10% of those initiatives succeed. And so the important thing to understand is we are at the beginning of the AI deployment within our workplaces. It's the initial first year and a half. Now, everybody is running towards this common goal. But interestingly, very few people understand the dynamics of this change that is happening. So I'm going to break it down for all of us. Let's go on to the next slide. So when you think about why all of these AI initiatives fail in companies, there are three core reasons. The first challenge when companies look at why are an initiatives failing, they obviously, the most important thing that comes to is we don't have the right people. People who understand AI and who can leverage it within their workplaces. And that is a huge challenge for companies. The second challenge that most of these companies look at is even if you have the correct people, we don't have the processes. Now, just to think about it, for example, if you as a designer were working before AI, you would have been expected to do a project, say, in about 4 weeks or so. Okay. So you would take your work, you would socialize it for a couple of times, get feedback from your team, modify it, and then you basically ship it out. Okay. Turns out now, instead of 4 weeks, you have exactly about a week to deliver. And so what do? You don't have time to share it or socialize it and get feedback. And now when you do share it, if you make a mistake, now everything gets restarted. So a 1 week program can become a 2 week program, can become a 3 week program, because we don't have the correct way to share it. We don't have the correct way to give feedback. We don't have the correct system and processes to cover for those outliers that happen. And so companies don't necessarily have the processes to deal with this new fast way of working. And finally, when you look at the third reason for failure, which is teams are a lot smaller. Now, what that means is traditionally, where you would have 2 or 3 designers or like maybe 6 or 7 engineers working together and stuff like that. Now you're basically saying 1 engineer, 1 designer, 1 product manager, and you're going to expect it to ship it. And so the challenge when that comes is now there is a single point of failure, either engineering, if engineering fails, or if product management fails, or if design fails, doesn't matter. It's a single point of failure. And so you have to go back, redo it. You don't have a second pair of eyes on the work. And so when you put all these three situations together, it's not surprising that you're talking 80 to 85% of all AI projects start failing within companies. And that's also one of the reasons why companies are starting to say, listen, if my initiatives are going to fail and these guys are not the right mix, this is where the more interesting dynamic comes within the workflow. If we go on the next slide. And the dynamic is layoffs. Right? We see two different things that are happening here within the industry. Okay? The first thing that's happening is salaries are increasing. The jobs are still being posted. However, at the same time, there are layoffs happening simultaneously. Companies are probably getting record profits. Their profits have not dropped. Okay. So what accounts for this interesting dynamic that is happening in our workforce? Okay. What is happening is companies are essentially saying, listen, if I don't have people that align with the skills I need to evolve my organization to the next level, but what do? Well, I need to get new people. If I need to get new people, I have to let go of the people that I do not think are aligned. And so there is a layoff happening on one side, right? Now, if you want to hire people with a certain skill set and that skill set is in high demand, guess what happens? Salaries increase for those kinds of people, the people that have demonstrated ability to work with AI.
Right.
And so when you start thinking through this, companies are no longer ready to invest in willing to train because even they don't know what to expect. And so they want people who are ready, who can actually take them into the next level rather than kind of bring someone in and train them on systems and processes that they're not aware of, and then kind of hope and deliver, which by which time the risk is companies are going to go, bankrupt or become irrelevant when you see, look at all the competition. Okay. And again, if you have questions, please do type it in. Professor Venkatesh will be curating them, and then he can, pass them on to me when the appropriate time comes. But do, put in your thoughts as you are, as I keep presenting. And if there's something that's relevant, I might actually stop and address it for that specific slide. All right.
Okay.
So,
Yes,
yes.
please.
So, Saurabh, if we can go on to the next one.
So, Professor Prasad, you
Yes.
mentioned companies are not sure. And so, in this changing landscape, what are the companies looking for?
Interesting. So, yeah, let's actually go on to the next one. So this is a very interesting one. Okay. So, well, what are companies looking for? So the traditional way that companies look at is they were saying, okay, we want you to have strong design skills and we need to have strong reasoning skills. Those are the two skills that companies would look at traditionally. But as soon as AI comes in, turns out design, already, Figma, I'm not sure if you saw the previous, the config, this one or the one before this, where they completely did a whole weather app automatically, right? Just a few text prompts and the complete weather app was done. Now, of course, it had its own controversy, but I'm reasonably confident that given enough money and enough motivation, they will solve that problem. You know. So what is happening is companies are saying, listen, design is the easier part. The UI is the easier part. So now I need people who have critical thinking skills because teams are smaller. I need people to think about what they're doing, why they're doing. Right? I need people to have very, very strong communication skills. If there's only 4 or 5 people in a team, you need to be very clear in your communication and make sure you're getting alignment. Right? And one other skill that people, this is probably the most important skill, is most companies are saying, I want people with growth and continuous learning mindset because technology is changing literally on a monthly basis. Like every month, I see new stuff. And so, if you as a designer have the mindset to kind of learn that and pick that up, you are much more valuable for the organization. Now, here's another interesting example. When you say, well, what is critical thinking skills? If you can explain that to me, right? Let's think through this example where there was a login experience. Okay. So previously, if you wanted to purchase a product or an air ticket or whatever, you would have to put in your email address and your password, and then you would have to create an account and log in, and then you purchase an air ticket. Turns out somebody really smart figured out, well, why do you need to log in? You know, instead of logging in, let's actually figure out because I already have this person's credit card. If there's a fraud, this person is going to come to fly on the plane, so I can arrest this guy. So, and then I have their proof of identity because when they come in to fly, I need to have the proof of identity. So I can very reliably identify the person who came to purchase the ticket. And so they just said check out as a guest, and that one simple thing increased that company's revenue by $200 million. And so that is the kind of thought that is required when you're thinking from a critical thinking skill perspective. The other example, if you think about Geo, Reliance Geo. Now, before they came, now today, when you're trying to get your SIM cards in India, what happens is you simply give a fingerprint, you show your Aadhaar card, and you're basically done. Right? But before that, what we had to do was provide documents in triplicate, maybe even 5 copies in some cases. And then you would have to have like 6 or 7 documents. There were Xerox machines right next door. You would go there and the Xerox guy will tell you what are all the documents you need. You copy all of them, take them to the Airtel office or whichever office, and then you basically get your SIM card. What literally Geo did was they turned a 5 minute process into under 30 seconds. They were giving out one SIM card every 30 seconds around the country, and that's how they became the largest telecom network in India. Right? And fundamentally, what they did was they didn't actually redesign their, a screen. They redesigned the whole process and they thought very critically about it and modified everything. So to the extent that today every telecom company now follows a similar process.
So,
And that is what I mean by critical thinking. So, Saurabh, if you go on to the next slide, I have a couple more slides, Professor Venkatesh. Is that okay?
yeah, sure. That's right.
Cool. Okay. So, this other thing is, the thing that I'm thinking through is, well, how does all this knowledge help us improve the MDES program, right? Or create an MDES program that's fundamentally different. So, let's go on to the next slide. So, when you start thinking about a job market, there are two key players in the market: the company that is hiring the individual and the individual that wants to join that company. So you have to kind of think through both of those perspectives. So when you look at the individual that is looking for a job, most of the people that we talk to are, they're thinking about, how do I build an amazing product? How do I become a design leader within my community? How do I get promoted? How do I get opportunities with the companies that I want? This is what individuals are thinking through as they're looking at planning their career, right? And probably, something that's coming is, how do I make sure my career is AI proof as I move forward? That's also a core thing that people are thinking. Now, when you look at the company perspective, companies are thinking, listen, I want strong reasoning and design skills. I want people who are able to do critical thinking. I want people who can communicate very clearly and get things done, and who have a growth mindset and learning, who are learning all the time. Now, there is a gap. This is what is the execution gap. Most companies struggle with the execution gap because they say, well, you have these two demands on both sides, but in the middle, when you hire people, the challenge is, well, we are not able to deliver our products. We have, a workplace that is, you have a lot of drama in the workplace, but you don't necessarily have the skills to get the job done. And finally, you have individuals within the organization who don't understand what the business goal is. Like, why am I putting a login button, right? What is my business goal? If my business goal is to increase revenue, well, the login button is disconnected to that business goal. And so understanding that business goal and connecting it to the product is also another huge challenge that companies look at. And this has also been my personal challenge as the founder of UX Reactor. When we founded it, this was exactly the challenge we were looking at when we were trying to hire people. Like, how do I get people who can execute, who can communicate, and who understand, who can connect the dots? And so what we did was we actually thought through from the ground up, really, how should the education training look like for a designer, right? It's not that you to a company and the company teaches you more stuff to be effective. You need to be effective on day one. Otherwise, companies are not necessarily even going to be able to look at you. So if you go on to the next slide, we kind of look at this as a philosophy. And again, we look at it as, how do you build mid to senior level competent talent? Now, the reason is why we look at mid to senior level talent is, if you look at junior level folks, they still understand the design and learning the basics, right? And for them to get hired, companies will, at some point, they will say, okay, your salary is low enough. So it's like, I'm not taking a risk, so I might possibly hire this individual. If you look at the senior folks, they have the understanding and the knowledge of a system. And so there's a lot of institutional knowledge that they have that they value. But the biggest people at risk and who have the largest opportunity are the mid-level folks. If you look at a lot of the layoffs that happen, it's the mid-level folks that are losing their jobs. Because these are the guys that can either, there's a significant amount of salary that the company is paying and saying, this is not worth it for us. Or these guys are slowing down the process, or they're saying, this guy knows the job, let's promote this person and give them more responsibility. So it's both a risk and a opportunity. And that's why we said, let's actually think about, how do we build competent mid to senior level talent that can drive industry's outcomes. And we do that through a 4-stage process. And this is something, again, I want you to think through your career is, how are you going to build these skills? Because these skills are absolutely critical. So Saurabh, if you can go on to the next one, please. Right. So, and again, before I go into the 4-level step, let's actually think through like how the education system also works, because this is important. So when we look at the traditional education system, which is more of a theory and project centric, where you kind of get a lot of theory and you do a lot of projects, The thing is, you have the knowledge. If I ask you, well, what are the laws, Hooke's law, whatever, you can probably name out like 5, 6 laws. Okay, good. You got the knowledge. Then I can say, well, how do you apply it? So you could probably read it from a book, and you can say, well, um, you can apply it when you're placing buttons, you can apply it when you do colors or whatever. Great. But then the question is, okay, now you're under time pressure. You have to deliver a project. Can you incorporate this concept and deliver the project? We don't know, right? Do you have the workplace skills to do communication and kind of engage people, bring people together and get them by? This is actually, in fact, one of the biggest complaints I hear from designers. In fact, most designers that I talk to, they say, how do I convince my team that my thought process is correct? Right? I mean, it's not an English language problem. It is how do I convince and how do I align them? And finally, leadership. How do I become a leader within my organization? So these skills are not necessarily taught through a theory or a project-centric approach. So what we've done is we said, no, you cannot learn through theory and project. You have to work with the industry every day, right? And so that is how you basically get into the workplace skills, the execution skills, and the leadership skills. And I'm going to get a little bit deeper into how we are integrated with the industry on a daily basis. Let's go on to the next one. Right. So the 4 pillars that I talked about, the first pillar is anything you learn has to be natively connected to AI curriculum. What does that mean? If you learn how to do an artifact, right, you should learn how to do it 10 times faster with an AI. Right? So essentially, what the way we look at it is, number one, you need to understand the concept. Right? And there's also new research, FYI. One of the reasons why I say this is there's research that says people who use ChatGPT generally tend to think less. Right? They give their autonomy and control to the AI bot where they are not thinking. But the point is you're being paid to think. You're being paid to be a critical thinker. So it's very important to retain your control of the system. So you need to understand the concept. You need to know how to do the job correctly, manually. Okay. And finally, you need to learn how do you take AI and accelerate that specific job 10 times faster. And how do you make sure you're verifying that the AI has done the correct job? So this is the first thing that you need to kind of think through is know the concept, know how to execute it, and then know how to manage an AI. And again, it's not use an AI, it's about managing an AI to get the answer that you want, right? And that is the first skill set that you need to think through. The second skill set is industry integration and exposure. Now, when you're looking at junior level folks and an internship is probably the right way because you're going into a company and you're basically saying, listen, I work with you for 6 months, I get some experience, I know my concepts, I can now get a job. But when you're going to mid to senior level jobs, you need to be able to work in multiple domains, right? The speed of delivery also has to be much faster. So the apprenticeships, the way we structure our apprenticeships is you work with a company for, maybe 3 to 4 weeks at the max. You go in, they have a specific problem, you solve that problem, you communicate, you align, build a relationship, and you move on to the next project. Right? You do the same thing, you move on to the next project. Next company, new problem. So the way that works is you learn to look at a problem from different perspectives. And you have multiple perspectives as well, because in one you might work in healthcare, the other one you might work in finance, the third one you might work in, let's say, logistics. And so you're looking at different perspectives and you're solving a similar problem. And so that is important. The other aspect is you need to build a portfolio that is where you can say, listen, I did something that's already deployed. Right? There's a difference between saying I took a fake project, did it, versus saying, here are 5 projects, 5 companies who will vouch for me, right? Who will say good things about me. And here's the work that I did that has been launched, right? And that is where the industry integration exposure is. We believe that every academic program needs to start, at least that is focused on the new generation of talent needs to start thinking about this. The next one is communication and storytelling. The way we think about it is 8 credits are focused on communication. When you're doing your apprenticeship, you're communicating. You are expected to present every time because when you're communicating, there are 2 things, the content of communication and the style of communication. So the content is, do you know what you're talking about and can you defend if somebody asked you a question? And the style is, how do you talk about it? Okay. And so when you look at the communication, you are learning both the content of communication. How do you make sure you have a strong case and you can defend yourself? And how do you tell a story in a way that your organization aligns with it? And lastly, what we say is you need to have your personal brand. Because again, when I started my career, my first mentor told me something very profound that I tell literally everyone I talk to is the first job you get, you should get because you applied for it. Right? After that, every job you get, you should get because people know your reputation or people invite you. They say, please come and join me. We would like to work with you. That is where your career takes off, right? And again, the difference between a career and a job is fundamentally that. When you think from a job perspective, you're just thinking next job. A career is you're thinking 5 jobs down the line, 5 years down the line, you want to be a director, a vice president, or whatever. You're planning your career down that path. And that's what you need to think when you think about the industry-centric training perspective. And then if we go on to the next slide. And so when we come to that, that is how we say you are getting your execution, your workplace skills, your leadership. That's how you do it. Right? So yeah.
Thank you, Professor Prasad. That was insightful. Uh, with this, we'll come to the end of your discussion, and now we'll start with our interactive discussion with our learners. So, Saurabh, can you just start the screen once? So I'd like to invite Mr. Bhaskar Komara. He's a senior UX designer with Trinet, a multi-billion-dollar company based out in the US. And Mr. Ashit Kalwa, UX designer with Bright Peers, another multi-billion-dollar company based out in the US. Uh, Bhaskar and Ashit, welcome.
Thank you, Professor Venkat.
So,
Thanks.
Bhaskar and Ashit, we'll start with a couple of questions. What was your background and why did you join this program?
Yeah. So Achut, you can go.
No, okay. So I'm being alphabetically okay. I can go then. So uh, I would like to touch base a little bit on my background because that is a very critical aspect for me. 2015, I graduated. I'm a commerce graduate, and then I worked as a business development manager for 2 years, and then I took a 7 year long break to pursue my spiritual interests. And during that time, I have been involved in managing leadership programs at Isha Institute of Inner Sciences under the umbrella of Isha Leadership Academy. And I had the opportunity to work with people who were diplomats from the United Nations and things like that. Basically, 7 years, what I've done is just swim in ambiguity. As a mandate, I was always working on things that I was never prepared for. And I trained myself as a classical Hatha Yoga teacher. Now, fast forwarding 7 years past, one thing was very certain for me that my life has always been revolving around this topic of consciousness. So, human factors, anything related to human factors, was a natural draw to me and something that I care for very deeply. That made me land into UX. And then I did a boot camp in 2019 ending. And then I landed myself at a place where it felt like I know all the industry buzzwords, whatever we find it on the social media, right? On the internet. But none of my resumes get picked up. There is no offers that are being rolled. And then I guess I would call that a breakthrough moment. In the beginning of 2020, I happened to hear about Prasad and Career Reactor. And then I jumped myself into a very small experimental program that was kind of helping me understand form design and then a little bit of how to critique a product. Why does something work? Why it doesn't work? So at that time, I just did whatever work that I did. It was in my rough notes, pen and paper, not even pencil paper, neatly drawn thing. And I happened to get an interview call who was supposed to be the founder of the company itself. and they were looking for somebody. They had enough visual designers in their team, and they were looking for somebody who could, kind of understand the business goal, the business side of it, and who are our users, why are we doing what we are doing, that kind of a thing. And I was looking for a space where I can learn more. uh, Salary was not a thing for me for my first job as a rule. And I guess it was a win-win situation. And within 1 hour, I did not even have any polished portfolio or something like that. So within 1 hour of this thing, I got my offer rolled out. I was really excited. And as the industry standard and the business requirement, it was a 3-month plan for me to put me as an intern. But I got direct into production within 1 month, where I did started delivering projects. From there on, I was honored the responsibility of stakeholder management also. 1 year I worked there, and then currently right now, wherever I work, my company Bright Peers right now. This is also, both the offers is something that I have not applied for. Actually, they came to me, as what Prasad has said earlier. And here I lead the UX team. I'm the lead of UX. So this offer I got with a 200% increment. This is still my small experimental modules that I have learned. So that is one thing. And then currently, right now, I really like my work because the level of responsibility that I have on my shoulders is of delivering very mission critical compliance driven systems, like in the government space of United States, like managing elections, disclosure systems for the lobbies, very specific applications that the Secretary of State handles. And the interesting thing is that my company finds me, so this thing that they have even sponsored for my program that I'm
Great.
doing right now.
Great. That was
So
quite
there's a lot, but I guess I'll take a pause here.
a quite inspiring story. And how about you, Bhaskar?
Yeah. So quickly introduction. So I'm Bhaskar, and I'm trained as an architect by education. And about 7 years ago, I shifted into UX. And when I started my career, I was all-in-one designer. So it's just dabbling between different visuals or even graphics, and also storyboarding for different components. Uh, Also, at that time, I was under one belief where I have to get into a master degree, and I have cracked through NID, and I was of AR 11th rank. But due to the cutthroat competition, I couldn't get into it, and that's where it was a reflection when I was just thinking back, like how I have been learning what I want to do, and I was purely focused on like I have to learn UX. And when I looked at how exams are structured for different competitive exams or for specifically design, it's more towards a generic approach of different components of design rather than specifics of what it is. And that's where I try to shift together. Like I could actually go and attempt a next attempt, and I am fairly confident that it would be a success there. But when I looked at what I wanted to learn in specific to UX, it was more towards like what is industry doing, and that's where I try to get to into uh, the companies and work as an interns first, and then actually moving into my career. And now, fast forward, I work with Trinet, which is a $4 billion company, and I was previously working with Pegasystems, which was a $6.5 billion company, where I was solving different problems, and I worked with different people. And this shift, when I failed with NID and I was clueless, and that's where I was fortunate to find Mr. Prasad as my mentor, and I've been part of this experimental program of this MDes, where I've been learning UX from a different lens. As he mentioned that it is an industry centric thing, so I started learning in those things I have executed. Now at my previous company, I can talk about one specific thing where this reflects on. Whenever a design is delivered or just ideating upon it, there are two set of questions which I see most people get asked. Did you do this kind of process, or did you miss this kind of process?
Right.
But those were not the questions which were asked to me. There is a slightly different question which was asked. why have you done this at this point of time? And that specific thing actually is a differentiating factor where stakeholders care about like what is my thought process rather than what did I do as an artifact. And that specific thing came up because there is a mindset shift that I've been trained for, and it's about not focusing on the solution, but focusing on understanding what is the problem and actually asking for what is the impact of it. And that actually helps you align with all the different stakeholders. And until now, like these are few of the cases where I've seen like there are different set of questions which are being asked. And today also I just asked my question that what if I have chosen the other path of trying it the next year and then joining the program. And I've seen multiple people, like I've been attending multiple events where I meet designers and have friends from and classmates from different institutions like IITs and NIDs. And there is a two common group of people which observe. One, there are people who are strictly focused on delivering whatever is asked and essentially solutions. Another set of people who are trained in these frameworks or the processes or the theoretical concept, and they try to execute only that component, and their goal is these two goals. And the outcome of these two is fairly common, where people get frustrated because there is no time to execute mostly research and everything. And the other components, like there are multiple use cases which comes after a design is done, and it's quite frustrating because it's a repetitive process. And that's where I think it's a slight edge over where industry centric training gives, is we ask for like questions where it's more towards like what is the problem and try to iterate upon what business is looking for, rather than actually executing on things and then just getting frustrated. So these are few things which I observe, and that's how it's like the industry specific thing shifts our way of mindset to approach a different problem when at workplace.
Right. So, Bhaskar, I mean, can you also share your job interview experience when you done this job?
Yeah, so that's like a step ahead. Sorry. So when I started way back interviewing, so there was a set of interview questions which were there. And if I look at companies back then, they were mostly focused towards like executing and delivering their first product, because it was a startup boom back then. And everyone were concentrating on delivering their first product, and they need execution from end to end. And all the things which they cared about was if this person would actually deliver from starting of a journey mapping or different product with different concepts which were there, executed them, and then has delivered. And that's where the interviews questions were also there. Have you executed this processes? What did you do as a process to do it? But as we grew, like as the time went by, these companies shipped their products. There are of course new companies, but there are these companies shift their products. They have identified what works for them, what are the challenges there were. Now the shift is that can this person solve a specific problem and discover why this problem is happening and also solve for it, rather than just end-to-end execution of things.
Right.
And my interview experience was the same. Earlier it was like, can you share a project which has end-to-end artifacts which was delivered? But now it is more towards like, how did you collaborate? How did you identify what was the problem? How did you collaborate and make people realize that this is the problem that you are focusing on? And also more towards like, what is the impact that this solution can create? And what were the challenges you faced when you were iterating for this solution? Because everything is a specific to the problem, not as a generalized thing. So it is always a unique thing. And all these interview rounds or the people who ask questions are focused on these kind of questions and these kind of narratives in a case study when we go ahead with it.
So that was interesting. And Achut, can you share your experience as well? Interview experience.
So, Professor Venkatesh, I already spoke a little about the how my interviews went.
Yeah.
There is one particular area that I wanted to touch related to how interviews have been. So specifically, my second job after I got in, I don't remember when was the last time that I was even thinking something like, okay, which color should I choose? How do I manage Figma? And I don't I hardly remember anytime like Bhaskar, how Bhaskar was telling what Bhaskar was telling also, right? Most of the time, whenever I have to deliver something, let us say I have 1 week to execute something, 4 days is spent in just trying to understand what is the problem and what could be my optimal approach and how do I plan for scale. So, why I'm saying this is because I am also responsible for recruiting for my team. So the last time I just did a recruitment 1 month ago, and I never even bothered about what is the candidate's tool proficiency. I just was concerned about are they detail oriented in general, and then do they have necessary this thing to see what is the problem and why is it happening. So, and often at times, I get approached on LinkedIn when people have interviews, they kind of try to approach me. The kind of problem statements, when I look at them, at the first glance, it doesn't even feel like it is a design problem statement. There is so much into it. It's more like, you need to understand systems involved in it, a little feedback loops, what are there. If I do something here, there is an impact that is driving elsewhere. So considering all these things, I feel like the interviews have changed a lot, and Prasad has touched base on this quite a lot of times that the expectation currently right now is very high. The entry level expectations are quite risen, quite risen. This is something that I can definitely say, and out of my experience and my observation so far. Hope
Thank
that
you.
answers.
Yeah, thank you. So, Bhaskar, can you also, would you like to add something about hiring process and how job interview has changed over a couple of years?
Yeah, so uh, I have been in that position when I was working with a previous company, and uh, the orders which were like I was replacing my role, and that's where it was more focused on like getting the things done from the first day itself. So it's about understanding what we were doing the project, and also understanding the nuances, and also iterating upon like adding value to it. So when the guidelines were very laid out that it has to be an critical thinking skills rather than like general, what do we say, competitive analysis and then getting those designs delivered like a visual aspect. But it's about documenting. So there is also one component which is there, like documenting which solution has been crafted and why it will work, and how that uh, working model will actually benefit the business. These are the different things which are expected from a
Right.
person who will be coming back.
The
And that's where
communication,
it's, yeah,
communication part. Okay.
communication as well as the accountability of like if we are actually anchoring back to whatever the problem is being solved.
Right, right. Okay. Right. That was great. Yeah. Thank you, Achyut and Bhaskar. With this, we come to an end of the webinar. Now I'd like to open the webinar, the session for question and answer from audience. Right. Right. So,
I see a couple of questions.
yeah, just going. So, Prasad, the question related to AI, what are the key challenges that UX leaders face when implementing AI-based products?
I think one of the biggest challenges that UX leaders face that doesn't translate is there are costs. So technically, if you look at, the old cost structure of a company for a project, majority of the cost used to be salaries, right? And then you have maybe about 10 or 15% of the cost of the company being, what do you call, additional capital expenditure, servers, locations, all that stuff. But today, because AI is so expensive, GPUs are so expensive, and every query literally, when you put a question in, the computer is probably thinking about 10 alternative solutions before it is giving one solution. So the amount of computation that is required is phenomenal. So in order to do that, almost 30% of the company's costs are going directly into server costs and facilities costs. So what you realize is you're not creating a new business. It's the same old business, but your margins have reduced by 30%. And so the challenge that comes from the business is I need to reduce my costs, because at the end of the year, you have to go back to the stock market and say, I've lost my profits by 30%, but I've made no change in my market share. I've made no change in anything else. Then market is going to penalize me. I'm going to lose my market share. And so that is a huge challenge. So what that means when they're hiring people, okay, they're looking at people who can find the most optimal solution. They're not designers who are not just thinking in terms of shipping something that looks good, but really thinking about, well, is an AI appropriate for this? If an AI is appropriate, well, what kind of an AI should I deploy, right? So there is that level of meta level thinking that they want the people that they want to hire for. And again, there's not a lot of people trained. So you don't have a lot of people in the market. That's fundamentally that. So, earlier if you used to say, I have a budget of, let's say, about 20 lakhs or 30 lakhs to hire a designer, you will not get an AI designer for 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs in that budget. It's almost impossible in the market, right? And so you're asking for more money in a place where the margins are getting tighter and you need to hire. And in addition, you would also, your projects are failing because the processes are not set up right. So you are not able to deliver within the time frame. So your products are getting delayed, or you don't have people who kind of can guide you. So when you start thinking about all of this, it becomes a very complex problem for a hiring for a VP of design, so to say, right?
Right.
And so that is when the natural tendency is you start focusing on the quality of people. That is absolutely important. That is what most design leaders are looking at, is focus on the quality who can help them solve this problem rather than they sit down and try to solve a problem which is fairly complex in its nature.
Right. Thank you, Prasad. So, Prasad, we do have another question. A sort of a program is actually addressing this. So, Hetal asks, how do we choose the company that gives us a chance to learn?
Right. Now, that is a really good question, because this is one of the things that we talk through within, when you're thinking about planning for a job versus planning for a career, there's a fundamental difference in that. When you're planning for a job, you're thinking, what is the maximum salary I can get out of this job? Right? When you're planning for your career, you're saying, well, how do I hit my target 5, 7 years down the line? How do I go through that? And so, in fact, there is a lot of planning. Some people might say, Achyut was really lucky he got the job he had. But I would say it was planning and strategy that got him to where he is. Right? Because I still remember the first time he had the offer, he basically came back and said, listen, I have an offer. I don't know what salary it is or whatever it is. And this is what, they just gave me an offer based on, my work that I did. And in his argument was, what, should I take it or should I not take it? Right? My point was, even if they didn't pay you a single rupee, take it. Okay? Because you're starting your career, and you've got like 7 years of a break. And then the thing is, and this is what my argument was, if I'm the boss and somebody comes to me and says, I'm working for free, I know this person is gold. I am going to be paranoid that somebody else is going to take this person away from me. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep this person happy at my company. And that's exactly what happened to Achyut. He went in there. Within a month, he proved that there was value to be made, and they said, okay, we'll give you whatever you want. They made him full-time. They started giving him money, all the stuff that he was looking at. And the point was, Achyut had a long-term perspective in his career plan. And then when he was shifting jobs too, he was looking at what are my roles, what are my responsibilities. He was not asking questions around what is my salary, what is my roles and responsibilities. And all he said was, compared to those roles and responsibilities, make sure you pay me fairly. It's a very simple statement, but it's a profound statement, because then the boss also realizes, wow, this guy is really confident, because this guy is not trying to negotiate everything from me one day one, saying, I know my quality, you know.
Right.
And you pay me fairly. If you don't pay me fairly, the unsaid part is I'm going to head out to someplace else where where it's going to be more fair. Or I might not even take your offer. So when you see somebody with that level of confidence, you tend to hire differently and you tend to treat them differently within your company. You know?
Yeah.
And I think that is something. And we also talk about another thing, which is there are three types of companies: type 1, type 2, type 3 companies. Type 1 companies are, they don't know what good design is, they don't care what good design is, right? And they will pay you peanuts. Okay. The salaries, even as of last month, I was talking to people. You see salaries that are like 10,000, 15,000, and the guy has a UX design title. And I don't understand what kind of a company that is. Then you have type 2 companies. These are companies that understand what good design is, but they don't know how to do it. They don't have the right team, or they don't know the process, or they don't have the right leadership. So they're looking to hire right people. And these guys will value the designers you get. And then you have type 3 companies, which are like the UX reactors, the Microsofts, the Googles, and all that, they know what good design is. Okay? And they know how to do it. So there's a fundamental difference in that. So what we say is, when you're looking for jobs, you should also plan for, identifying the right kind of company and getting into that. So there are skills and techniques that you kind of get to understand what kind of a company this is, so you know exactly what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and you've answered multiple questions actually. Ankit, your question is already answered by Mr. Prasad. With this, we come to the end of our questions. We don't have any more questions.
Maybe we could take one or two more questions. Is that okay? Could I?
Yes.
Because I see a couple of really good questions that I want to make sure that we are answering before they step away.
Uh,
Yeah.
one question. Yeah, Prasad, if you could.
So there's one person actually that says, is there a possibility to have a 9-day campus immersion virtually? Right. And again, I would say absolutely not. Right. And it's a very simple statement that I say is like, again, the question is, well, what is the outcome that this program is trying to achieve? If I'm trying to train mid to senior level folks and I teach you like, okay, let's say, how do you audit a product? How do you how do you think through a transactional experience? How do you do interaction design? I teach you all these concepts, but you've never done it under pressure and you never delivered a single product at quality under pressure. Think about it. What happens? You are going to graduate without confidence. So for me, the 9-day immersion is a non-negotiable, because that is the time when all the concepts you learn, right, are basically, you are being held accountable in those 9 days to deliver a product. Right? End to end. You have to think through all the working stuff, all the moving parts. You have to think about all the possibilities, all the mistakes, and you're getting feedback on a regular basis. You can never do that level of feedback and that level of support when you're doing online. So that's why, and the other thing that I also say is, your success has a lot to do with your peers as well. So we might think that we are successful by ourselves, but the relationships you build with your classmates, with your juniors, with your seniors, that has a profound impact on your career in the long term. So if you say, I want to do it offline, or I want to do it, remotely, but you're never going to build those relationships. So how do you actually get to the next level? So for me, my argument is, if you want to be a leader and you want to grow, you have to kind of put in the time and the effort to do it. Right? It can't be like reading a book and writing a bunch of exams and you suddenly get a piece of paper. Because companies, and this is the other thing I say, don't look at the degree, look at the knowledge and the capability you gain. The degree is a side effect. The degree will help you open doors, but the knowledge is what is going to help you build your career.
Yeah. Thanks, Prasad.
Then let me see this. So yeah, this is one other question that I've seen, which is very common, and I want to address that as well. The question is, will AI take my job?
Yeah.
And we hear that every time, and I do want to address that. And my answer to that, and I think somebody put that in a chat, but not in the Q&A. And my answer to that is, if you are doing your work mechanically, which is doing UI, doing components, just basically shipping stuff that you've been told to do, probably yes. Right? If you're doing the critical thinking components, the organizing, the leadership, and stuff like that, then the chances are definitely no. Right? And so that is where it is. It is, are you doing strategy? Are you doing execution? If you're doing execution, there are tools that will come, if not today, tomorrow, if not tomorrow, day after tomorrow, that will do your execution better than you can. Right? But if you're doing the critical thinking, you're doing the planning, the strategy, the execution, the coordination, the leadership, there's no way an AI bot can take your job. In fact, you're the guy that companies that want to hire with that premium.
Yes.
So in many ways, the answer is yes and no, right? It depends on your capacity to kind of recognize that the world is changing and you change with the world.
Yeah. Yes, Prasad. So I think we do have a couple of more questions in Q&A section.
So I think we are
Otherwise,
about done. Yeah, go ahead.
the Agarwal mentioned, somewhere you mentioned that the best way to learn is by doing small projects and jump onto other companies and so on. Will that be detrimental to resume being short term with the company?
Okay, so you say some people, or did I mention it that you should do short projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was Achut who, part of program
No,
you
I
mentioned.
mentioned that when you do the industry-based approach, you do apprenticeships,
Yes, yes,
right?
yeah.
Because you're doing it as part of your program. You're not doing it as part of your career in some ways, right? I mean, the program, you're saying it's a master's program. I had to do 7 projects,
Yes, yes. I think the other
all live, right? And so when you say that, it has no impact on your career. In fact, it's better because you have seen multiple multiple domains and multiple teams from different perspectives. So you are much more rounded when you apply for your first job or your second job or your third job, right?
yeah, during the learning
And
period.
yeah, and in fact, most of the people that are in the program, I think there are about 40% of our folks who have more than, I think, 6 years of experience working as designers. Then you have another, the rest of the folks on average have about, between 1 to 3 years of experience. And we've taken about 10% of the folks who have probably less than, a year of experience or no experience at all, because we think they're absolutely phenomenal and we can help them grow, you know. So at a larger perspective, you already have certain level of experience. If you don't have experience, you've got these projects that you're already working and you're talking about them as part of your portfolio. You're not saying I've worked with company 1, company 2, company 3 as part of my job experience. You're saying you work with them as part of your master's degree program. And so that helps you. Now, that said, if you are thinking about jumping companies every 2 months or 3 months, absolutely not. My recommendation is you should not think about leaving a company for at least 18 months after you join, at least. Because the reason is because the first year, you probably have no clue. You're still first 6 months to a year, you're still figuring out what it is. You start delivering value. That's when your company's, your reputation increases. That's when people know who you are. So you should never leave a company without delivering value to that company, because that's how people know you. And that is something I would say is job hopping is, unless the company is really bad or you have, extreme circumstances, I would say, don't hop jobs frequently. Just do it, deliver value, and then move on to the next role.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have one last question from Vishal. Does working at a software agency truly helps solve business goals? Is it a good environment for a UI UX designer to grow, or a product design companies a better choice?
See, if you're looking at a product design company, this is a fundamental difference. Product design companies have fewer roles available to them, and they expect people to be very competent. Right? So it is harder to get into product companies, but it is much more valuable. I mean, if given a chance between a service company and a product company, I would always take a product company because you know how to ship. You know the practical problems. If you're doing a service company, unless you are like, the few companies like UX Reactor, where we say we are coming in and taking over your design process, you know, it's very hard to get insights into the the way everything works, right? And so the challenge that happens is when you're working in a service company, you do what the customer wants you to do, even if you know it is wrong. You will do it, and then the person says, okay, yeah, I wanted something different. Okay, it's going to take 100 hours more. You bill them for 100 hours and you do something else, right? So in a lot of ways, you don't learn how to make decisions. You don't learn how to be critical, how to think through the problem. And also, a service company, you know, every company that is a client will try to negotiate you on your money, on the amount of payments. If you're paying less money, then obviously you don't grow as much, because so what a service company will do is they're more willing to take risks on people. They'll say, bring them in, we will train them, we'll get them up to a certain standard, and then we will see. So there's always a trade-off. If you're good enough and you have the ability to get into a product company, by all means get into it, right? However, if you're not able to do, a good start is with a service company where you understand the basics the service company is teaching you. But at some point, never compromise on your accountability, because it is very easy for a designer working in a service company to say, I'm not accountable. I do what somebody else does. The moment you say that, your career is dead. You need to be accountable, right? And that's how you transition into a product company after that.
Right. Thank you. So, we have Prasad. We have one last question. We can.
Okay.
I think Swapnil is looking for career guidance. He is currently working as a visual designer, and he would like to switch to the UX and is unsure as where to start with.
Okay, Swapnil is saying, like, I guess he's working for 12 years um, and he's wondering if he should transition into UX. And I think, the core thing that you want to think when you're transitioning, okay, is, are you transitioning into UX and are you going to be a fresher? Or are you going to transition because you've got 12 years experience, you already have a certain amount of salary, you have certain amounts of, commitments within your family and stuff like that. So I would recommend it as long, and the opportunities are good. However, I would recommend it as long as you can connect your previous experience to your new knowledge of UX and transition into a higher or a better role, right? If you are saying that, I'm going to learn UX and start from fresh again, I don't recommend it for somebody with 12 years of experience. And so that is something, again, you need to plan your career strategically as you do this transition, so that you are not losing out on the opportunities and the seniority that you've worked so hard to get.
Thank you, Professor Prasad. With this, we'll come to the end of the questions as well.
So Venkatesh, your audio is is breaking up.
Am I clear? Audible?
Yeah, a little bit better. Yes.
Right. So we've come to the end of the questions already, Professor Prasad. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. It was very insightful having a conversation with you. And I'd like to thank Bhaskar and Anirudh as well for the interactive discussion session. And thank you all. Thank you, audience. Have a good evening.
And we wish you the best of luck. And one thing I do want to say, closing thoughts, is this is a wonderful time we are living in. It's a wonderful time because we are living in an age of transition. We are living in a place where whatever you imagine can become reality. But the thing is, you have to prepare yourself for it. So I wish you the best of luck, and we hope to see you on our next webinar in a month's time.